is basically with that tax, in the way that it's being used today, is to incentivize essentially people that are building or people that are buying to use locally sourced goods and services.
That's
essentially,
right.
I mean that's the easiest bottom line way to explain what a tariff is.
Right.
Now, in reality, the question is who is going to pay that tariff?
Yes.
Is it going to be the consumer, or is it ultimately going to be absorbed by the provider of, I guess, the finished product of that
Right.
good or service?
Right. Yep. And I think we also should address the concept of how tariffs are being viewed in regards to who's going to pay the end result of it in the grand scheme of things. Because I'm on the other side of the coin looking at it as, okay, this is another way that the United States is going to bring in revenue. This is another way for us to create more jobs locally. Yep. If we don't, let's look at it this way. As of right now, the United States pays tariffs for most imported vehicles that other countries sell here in the United States. Meanwhile, we I'm sorry, if we sell it the other way, but them coming here to sell, let's call it Land Rover Defenders, let's call it anything that is made outside of the country and sold here, we're being charged for that. Is that right?
Right.
The other way around, it's not happening. So essentially, if we're talking about a good or a service, and in this case, lumber, right? We get most of it from Canada.
Yep.
In that case, would we not then start creating lumber factories and creating jobs that then affect that bottom line consumer in a positive manner, et cetera? And I think that has a lot to do with the sentiment that goes along with these tariffs is the misconception of what they actually are. Gilly, what are your thoughts on this?
So, I agree with all that, right? I think that answer was spot on, but we also got to think of where they're developing, right? What parts of the country? So, like specifically that example when we were talking earlier, we got a coach of ours, and he does a lot of big projects. So, like this specific project is a $100 million project. And that is in Nashville, which our understanding, the majority of that lumber comes from Canada, right? So if those tariffs are put on that project and there's inflation, they've got that development services agreement that the consumer actually or the developer is not responsible for that, right? So not responsible for that tariff that's assessed, not responsible for the inflation. So if those products go up in price, then that's going to be put on the developer, right? That'll drastically change their numbers if it's a 20-25% increase. Right. So being mindful of that, I think for us that are in Texas, it's my understanding that a lot of our lumber comes like south of Mexico, right? Not Mexico specifically. Same thing with sinks and faucets. A lot of that comes from Spain.
Right.
So a developer partner client of ours was just saying, hey, like, I don't think we would have any impact. Like, it would impact us at all, and we're not worried about it, right? And if it does, if some of the goods that we're getting are coming from Mexico, we'll just go get it from somewhere else.
Right.
So I think there's a work around it, right? I think the big one that we have to pay attention to, like we were talking about, is our local municipalities, right? Like, we're seeing it too. I guess I probably won't say the name, but one of our local providers, only two, right? So we had a quote, and this was about a 2-year quote on some horizontal development. Horizontal meaning bringing in roads and utilities. This is specifically on the utility side. We had about 2 weeks to sign this, right? Because if not, it would expire.
Okay.
Well, that quote that came from this local utility company, if we didn't sign it before, they didn't pay that fee, it's going to increase by 300%.
Wow.
That's massively going to affect the number, right?
Wow.
So for the local builder, we're not building the product, but for that local builder, they're going to have to pass that on, obviously, to the consumer.
Right.
Your impact fees, right? Your impact fees are to bring in your water meter and your sewer tap, right, to tie in with saws in this case. That has been increasing too. Like, those are things that we have to think about. All the regulations that we have with the city, all of your permitting fees, those are the things locally that we can control, I feel like, that the city can control, the state can control. That I think those is that's where we should be saving.
I totally see that. Yeah.
So the ultimate irony there, right, is also where are people getting their news from? Where are
Right.
people where are people hearing about this? There's no sexy 30-second soundbite about developer impact fees.
Right.
But it's very easy to go, Orange Man bad, lumber tariffs coming in.
That's right.
And not to get into, too far down the political rabbit hole, right? But administrations of all sides have been imposing and taking off tariffs.
And why is that, John? I mean, the idea of this concept of tariff and why it has been over promoted in the media as a negative tactic, in my opinion, is completely wrong because of what you just said there. It has been utilized throughout every administration for negotiation.
Right. Look. What's funny, right, is Trump had imposed tariffs during his first term.
Yep.
Biden came in, and all you hear about during that initial campaign was oh, terrible! Look at all these things that he's done, all these tariffs that he's imposed. They didn't lift one.
No, they kept them in place, just like the tax cuts.
Right.
Absolutely.
And then during that time, the media never talked about it, and now he's president again, and now it's all over the media again. It's all in the news again. So it's I find it disingenuous and disheartening because again, the real topic that should be talked about, in my opinion, is that local, regional, state regulatory cost. The regulatory burden to build a home is approximately 25%. So cost to build, 25% is regulation. My father's a developer down in South Texas, and for years he's been touting these numbers because he saw them firsthand, right? Put in a master plan community, and so he was a developer on that. So he was absorbing all those initial lot and development costs.
Right.
The cost of every $1,000 in increase in utility impact fee ultimately winds up being $15,000 to $20,000 increase in ultimate sales price of that house. So why don't we talk about that? In San Antonio, for example, okay, well, what political affiliation is a majority of San Antonio? So again, no one's out there talking about, hey, these development costs need to be under control locally or streamlined somehow. It's all, oh man, price of lumber is going to screw you over. And it's like, man, there's so many facets of that.
Absolutely. Yep. So now let's transition to this letter, because the idea of what we're talking about here, matter of fact, John, you said it a moment ago, disingenuous and disheartening. Okay.
Yes.
And that's kind of how I feel about this that we're getting ready to go through. This is what prompted this conversation. This is what sparked the enthusiasm behind the scenes and why we're having this discussion. So this is from the National Association of Home Builders. It was sent on January 31st, and it is addressed to the Honorable Donald Trump, President of the United States, and it is regarding tariffs and building materials from Canada and Mexico, obviously to address the tariffs that are coming. It says, "Dear President Trump, our country is facing severe housing shortage and affordability crisis, which you can recognize on your first day in office by issuing an executive order that seeks to increase housing supply and affordability.